What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to LetsNot, and welcome back to Pokemon Unite. Alrighty, guys, so just in case you're out of the loop, Pokemon Unite just released today for mobile. So I know there's going to be a bunch of new players and a bunch of new people coming into the game who have not played the game before. So I thought this was the perfect time to talk about the current state of the meta of the game right now, and to give you guys, especially all you new mobile players coming in, an idea of what the top-end gameplay looks like. So Masters level gameplay. I myself solo climbed all the way to Masters, and then I've also played Masters in a 5-stack as well to get an idea of kind of how the meta changes when playing with a dedicated group versus solo, and thought it's finally time. I have not made any tier list videos yet as far as the actual characters in Unite, so I wanted to get this tier list out here to help you mobile players understand, at least at the top level play, what are the best characters and why. Why are these the best characters? So without further ado, let's jump into it. Hey guys, Editing Let's here. Just a heads up, they just today announced there's going to be a big old balance patch to Pokemon Unite to come along with the mobile release. So just a heads up, I did record this like a day or two ago, and so there will be a few changes probably made to this tier list as a result of the new balance patch that's coming out with the mobile release. Things like Wigglytuff getting a little bit worse because of the changes to Sing, stuff like that. Don't worry though, most of this will probably remain mostly unchanged, but if there are any major changes to the meta as a result of these balance patch that's going into play, I will go ahead and pin a comment, and you guys can look at that comment for any movements. So like if, for example, Wigglytuff drops from S to A, I will mention it in that comment. So I just want to put that in there real quick, guys, in case you're a little confused with the new balance patch. But yeah, back to the video. All right, so we got this lovely tier list here made by, it looks like Oinyan Knight. Anyway, we got this beautiful tier list here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break down the different characters, and just a heads up, guys, this tier list is to an extent my own opinion, as well as the opinion of a few other Masters players that I regularly play with at kind of the top level of Pokemon Unite play. So again, if you guys disagree with something, definitely leave a comment, let me know why. But I will try and explain why I rank every Pokemon the way that I do, to help give you guys a better idea of, if you're just getting into Pokemon Unite with the mobile release, what characters should you focus on if you really are looking to get to that top level play. And just as a heads up, some characters will work better at lower ranks and more casual play. And if there's a character with a huge discrepancy, like for example, Absol, we'll talk a little bit about Absol, does way better in casual play than top level ranked play, I'll talk about that as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So I've actually got this all split up here. So we're going to go over defenders first, then all-rounders, then supporters, range attackers, and finally Speedsters. So if you guys are only interested in one of those things, I'll try and put in like some chapters or something so you can jump just to that type or that role. But starting off with defenders, and again, it's also very important to kind of compare when making a tier list like this, comparing defenders to defenders, all-rounders to all-rounders, stuff like that. So that's kind of why I have it split like this. But starting with our defenders, we're going to go ahead and start with Slowbro. And Slowbro is going to fall into the C tier. So I love Slowbro. He's such a wonderful Pokemon, super derpy, but just unfortunately in Pokemon Unite, he just doesn't do very well. He's just not tanky enough, and his moves, unfortunately, they don't do quite enough. Like, for example, like Slowbro's kind of his whole point is to kind of hit enemies with Surf, CC them a bit, which stands for crowd control, make it so they can't play, and then also use a move called Telekinesis to kind of hold an enemy in place. But there's just so many moves that stop Telekinesis from working. His ultimate also holds something in place and doesn't do very much damage. And they just recently, it's fairly recently nerfed his Surf, which made him even worse. So unfortunately for Slowbro, he's just not in a good place. He doesn't have the stats to be super tanky like Snorlax or Blastoise, and his moves just don't do enough, and they're way too easy to counter. So unfortunately, Slowbro, he definitely needs, I think, a little bit of a buff, at least maybe even just do his base stats, because right now he just feels a little too weak. And on the very opposite side of that spectrum, we've got Blastoise. Blastoise is one of the few characters that I'm going to be putting into S tier today just because he's so incredibly powerful. So not only is Blastoise a great defender, outside of HP, he's got more defensive stats than Snorlax. And Snorlax beforehand, kind of before Blastoise came out, was kind of like the premier defender. He got a little bit of a nerf, still super good, but yeah, Blastoise not only does he have a ridiculous amount of defense, right? He's also got an insane amount of offense as well. So just the amount amount of damage that he can do with his ultimate, with rapid spin, water spout is absolutely insane. Probably needs a little bit of a nerf if we're being honest, but he's like the newest character to release in Pokemon Unite. So it makes sense that he's kind of the strongest for a while, but even now that he's been out for a little while and people have been playing around him and countering him, he still is a staple in top level ranked play, which just shows how powerful Blastoise is. And to that same note, Snorlax, right? So Snorlax is very, very good, but Blastoise has kind of usurped him as the king of the defenders, right? So that's why I'm putting Snorlax in A, just because he can't really complete with Blastoise super well. I mean, he has a couple moves that allow him to kind of control an area, like Block is super good. All of his moves are pretty decent, except arguably Flail is not very good, right? So Block is good, Yawn is good to set people asleep for a short amount of time, and then finally Heavy Slams is just a very strong move. But ultimately, Snorlax is a very underwhelming ultimate. It basically makes you fall asleep, does little damage over time. It's not great. So overall, I think Snorlax, because he doesn't have a strong ultimate like Blastoise to put on that pressure, and he has about the same defensive stats, again, I'm going to put him just slightly beneath Blastoise as far as how he plays the meta. Still a very strong pick for a defender, don't get me wrong, but just a little worse than Blastoise. He doesn't bring as much to the table. And then finally, we're going to put Crustle here. Crustle is the last defender available. So right now we only have the 4 defenders available in the game, and he's more of a niche pick. So Crustle doesn't play like a typical defender. He plays as like as more of a off tank selection, right? So he's actually a very good attacker. He's very good at CCing. He's very good at pushing people around, and he's very fast. He's definitely by far the fastest defender in the game, and one of the fastest characters in the game as well. So he runs Shell Smash, which basically for a short amount of time makes him super strong and super fast, just like it does in the normal Pokemon games. And you hit people with X-Scissor, you can push them off of points, you can push them into your team, and really it just keeps them tied up for such a long time, because X-Scissor hits like 3 times and just keeps that Pokemon from doing anything as it's going through that entire attack animation. So again, Crustle has a lot of killing potential. It's unparalleled in scoring potential too. Like if you do want to go like with a weird Score Shield build, just because between its Score Shield, Buddy Berry, its ultimate, like it can get an absurd shield up to like 80% extra of its HP, because you get the 40% roughly from Buddy Barrier, you get the 40% from its ultimate, and it's just, it can do an insane amount of damage or be insanely tanky all in one. But here's the thing, it's not tanky enough to replace a Snorlax. It's not tanky enough to replace a Blastoise as a main tank. It's more of an off-tank split push, kind of like a weird flex Pokemon that you can use on your team to secure objectives or to kind of just be there to apply pressure. So again, it's more of a niche pick, which is why it's going to be in this B tier here. But it's a very strong pick for when your team has that flex slot open and you can use it effectively. Alrighty, so next thing we're going to talk about is the all-rounders. So the first all-rounder we're going to talk about is Garchomp, man. And Garchomp is just bad. I think Garchomp is arguably the worst character in the game, just because, unfortunately for Garchomp, it takes him so incredibly long to get up to speed, right? So Garchomp, he evolves super late in the game, and then really he's only actually at full effectiveness for half the game. And then even once you get him evolved all the way up full power, even after his recent buff, he doesn't do enough. His ultimate is super hard to aim, super weird to use, and like a lot of times you won't get all of your hits off on your ultimate because like it hits a ground, then it like jumps to another place, hits a ground, jumps to another place. It's super awkward to use. His ability is Rough Skin, which is okay, but it doesn't typically do a ton over the course of a match. And overall, he feels slow, he feels clunky, his moves are weird. Like he's got like a Dragon Rush, Dragon Claw combo. It's a weird combo, and unfortunately he just is kind of bad. He's in pretty much in all ways I can really think of kind of just worse than a Charizard, because you know Charizard, and we'll talk about Charizard next, is kind of a B tier. He fits that niche role of a very bulky bruisery type, right? So Charizard doesn't deal bursty damage, right? Charizard is going to be a Pokemon that you can use to kind of deal consistent damage, right? He's got Flamethrower, he's got Fire Blast, he's got all these moves that will slowly whittle down your opponent while he's also not dying the entire time. And on top of that, he has an extremely powerful ult that allows him to fly up in the sky, do a bunch of Flamethrowers for a long time until finally he picks somebody up and slams them. But he gets that ult back so quickly. Like his ult refreshes so quickly. He's on a really quick cooldown. And because he's so bulky, it makes it hard for bursty characters like Greninja or Absol to kill him, right? Because he has so much health and he's kind of this bulky bruisery type. And in fact, like he used to be pretty bad, but they recently buffed his stats. They buffed his moves quite a bit. And now he actually serves as kind of an effective counter to Greninja and Absol and some of these other Gengar, some of these Zeraora, some of these other really bursty type characters. Charizard really shines against those characters, and he can come in and really take the damage they hit and then just wear them down over time and kill them. So again, Charizard's a really interesting play now. He didn't used to be. He used to be really bad. He used to be right down here with Garchomp in kind of the D tier, but now again, he actually plays out pretty well. So definitely deserves his place. Now, the best all-rounder in the game, pretty much everybody agrees at the top level, the best all-rounder in the game is Lucario. Lucario, part of the reason he's the best all-rounder in the game is because all-rounders, they're supposed to take a little while to get strong, right? Because if you look at the other all-rounders, right, Garchomp, if you look at Machamp, they all have to, Charizard, they all have to evolve, right? And that means that they're going to be weak at their previous evolutions until they finally get evolved and they're ready to go. There is no Riolu in this game. So Lucario starts off as Lucario, and just by that alone, starts off with more stats and starts off incredibly strong. Not only that, but Lucario is one of the few Pokemon where pretty much every single one of his moves are strong. Power Up Punch is super strong. Bone Rush lets him teleport and hit people. Extreme Speed gives him a dash that chases people down that you can reset. It's just, Lucario's so strong. His ability, like his passive ability, is like if he takes damage, he gets a shield and gets faster. Incredibly strong. It's basically like a free focus band, but better. And it's just like, it's crazy how useful Lucario is. His ultimate, it's not great. It doesn't deal a ton of damage, but it has an incredible range. So like there will be some games where, and you'll see these clips sometimes on YouTube where a Lucario player like snipes a Zapdos or a Dreadnought from like a mile away. So even though his ultimate is weird, it's got so high range that you can still get a lot of value out of it for some of those swingy plays that can literally determine an entire game. So Lucario definitely sits in S tier. He's basically been played constantly since the beginning of this game came out at high level masters, and he's still played everywhere at high level masters, right? He's one of those Pokemon that does define the meta. You need to be able to answer Lucario, right? And there's some Pokemon that just can't answer Lucario, and that makes them inherently worse. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is Machamp. And Machamp, this one kind of breaks my heart, but Machamp is down here sitting in the C tier. And Machamp used to be in the A tier, used to be strong, but the way the meta, and this isn't necessarily Machamp is bad, but the way the meta evolved, the way other characters evolved, it came to a point where now, like, well, instead of picking Machamp, you pick Charizard, because Charizard kind of does what Machamp does better. Like, jungling Charizard, which means playing kind of the center lane, now kind of outperforms a jungling Machamp, and they both do the same thing. They're both bruisers. They both took down some health. Machamp can throw something back into your lines, which is with submission, which is a very valuable thing, don't get me wrong, and it does counter certain strategies, but in the current meta, he's just kind of in this mad point. I think Machamp could very easily jump up to A tier as the meta shifts, or if the meta changes, he could definitely be, way up here in A tier. But at the current place, he's kind of found himself to be like a little bit of an orphan in Pokemon Unite. He doesn't really fit anywhere, and it's not really necessarily that his moves are too weak or he's too weak. It's just the game evolves into a situation where he doesn't really fit into teams, and because of that, he's kind of sitting in this mad tier. That said, a really strong jungling Machamp can be such a dangerous Pokemon because, again, his base stats are fine, his moves are fine. It's just the meta around him that's weird. So if you're playing in a weird circumstance or the other team's using a really off-meta team, there are some teams that Machamp can just go in and just obliterate, but he's definitely kind of in an off-meta state right now. All right, so now we're going to get into the supporters. So the first support I want to talk about is Eldegoss. So Eldegoss jumps right up here into the A tier. It used to be S tier, arguably, and then Blissey came out, and now it's more of a, well, you don't take Eldegoss every time. Now it's like, well, do I take Eldegoss or do I take Blissey? And I'll actually talk about them together. So Blissey's also in the A tier. And it's like, well, now they do things a little differently. So they're two different healers, right? And Eldegoss focus, and they both are buffers, right? So the only difference is Eldegoss has more debuffing potential, and Blissey has more raw healing potential, right? So Eldegoss, it basically uses things like Pollen Puffs and Cotton Guards to buff your team, heal your team a little bit, and debuff the enemy team and damage the enemy team a little bit. So it's like this buff heal and then debuff damage setup. So it's a little goofy. The healing is more gradual. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you a shield. When the shield disappears, then you're going to get some health back, right? And it's more of a kind of a passive type of play style. In that regard, versus Blissey, which is very, very simple to understand. I hit this button, we both heal. I hit this button again, we both heal. I hit this button again, we both heal. I use Helping Hand, all of us now attack better, right? So that's the way that they're a little different. And again, Eldegoss has debuffs, Blissey doesn't. Blissey's not a debuffer in any way. It's just a buffer and a healer. And their ultimates are both really good. So Eldegoss, it goes up in the air, goes invulnerable for a while, hits the ground, smashes, deals damage, and then heals everybody. Blissey is a focused ultimate. It only heals one of your teammates, but basically you jump into one of your teammates, dash that teammate. Anything between you and the teammate will take damage, and then that Pokemon will get a shield, and then it'll get additional attack and special attack as well. So basically it turns them into a super Pokemon with a super shield for a little while. And then you are also sharing some of that damage so you can help tank for that Pokemon. So basically use it on something really squishy like a Greninja, and then that Greninja can just go dominate a team fight because it'll be harder for the enemy team to kill that Greninja, and that Greninja can just do an insane amount of damage. Next, we've got Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime, he's definitely a very niche pick, right? He's one of those Pokemon that it can be hard to play against him if somebody doesn't know how to play against him, but he can also go into a match and do almost nothing. So Mr. Mime's really got two modes, right? He's got damage mode, which means I want to use guard swap and I just want to hit a bunch of confusions, throw people into walls, things like that. Or he's got barrier mode, which is going to be area denial, but Mr. Mime's interesting because he actually does do a ton of damage, but you have to make sure that you meet his conditions, right? So really, in every case, you either run barrier or guard swap, and you run confusion. And confusion is going to do extra damage to anything that's either guard swapped or anything that hits a wall, so aka a barrier, right? So again, when playing Mr. Mime, it's really important to be aware of your surroundings, your scenery, to confusion people into walls, into avalanches from Ninetales, into whatever you can to get that extra damage through. And then guard swap, he can do a tiny bit of healing as well. Like once you get guard swap upgraded, and you can use it on a teammate to get increased movement speed, as well as heal both you and that teammate. But he's not a good healer. He's, especially compared to Eldegoss and Blissey, he's not a good healer. Like if your goal is to heal as a supporter, Mr. Mime's not the choice. But if your goal is to buff movement speed of your teammates, maybe debuff the opponents and get some surprise kills on the opponents, Mr. Mime's great. In fact, ironically enough, Mr. Mime is the best one-on-one duelers in the entire game. He can beat any of the other Pokemon in a one-on-one, just if they meet in a lane under fair conditions, just because the way his modifiers work, the way guard swap works, the way confusion works, it's just a very powerful move. And because of that, it can be very difficult to lane against him because you can never underestimate the damage output of Mr. Mime. Next, probably which is, I mean, as much as it hurts me to say, because if you guys have watched my streams, you know I'm not a big fan of Wigglytuff, but Wigglytuff is comfortably sitting in the S tier. So Wigglytuff used to be bad. It used to be horrible. It was one of the worst Pokemon in the game by pretty much everybody's account. And then they buffed it and gave it stats pretty much equaling a Snorlax, right? So now like Blastoise, Snorlax, and Wigglytuff are like the bulkiest Pokemon in the game. They gave Wigglytuff so many stats. It's absolutely absurd. And what else Wigglytuff brings to the table is just Sing is such a valuable move to get everybody to sleep. You sling everybody, double slaps, decent damage. You don't ever really use rollout, at least not a top level competitive play, but like for casual play, it's really funny because you take people into a tunnel and just roll out until they die. But at least at top level play, that doesn't really happen. But just being able to put people to sleep is such a pain in the butt for other players to deal with, as well as it's just so hard to kill a Wigglytuff that it's always going to be there in the fight, be involved in the fight, soaking up damage, getting people to fall asleep, hitting people to CC them, and then having a big old ultimate, you know, that just, again, just really messes with the entire situation, grants shields. Wigglytuff is just a mess, man. Wigglytuff's a mess to deal with, and it's always a threat because it's just there. It's just there putting people to sleep. It's just there being a presence, getting a little bit of damage through, and they buffed Wigglytuff too much, man. They buffed Wigglytuff way too much, in my opinion. Like they gave it way too many stats. But you know, maybe Wigglytuff gets a nerf later. I don't know. We'll have to see. It's also got this really infuriating passive where if you hit it, it'll draw your Pokemon closer towards it. Right? It's super annoying. It's cute charm, right? So it's super annoying. All right, so that's gonna be the supporters. Again, all of the supporters are pretty good. All the supporters are pretty good. Even Mr. Mime, who's more of a niche supporter, is solid. So playing supporters, if you do like playing supporters in these type of games, you will be right at home because there's no really bad choice you can make with supporters. I will say though, Mr. Mime doesn't really do the job of a main support. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about Alolan Ninetales and the ranged attackers. Alolan Ninetales is good. Alolan Ninetales is strong. Alolan Ninetales has kind of been in A tier since the game's release. It's always been kind of like right below S tier and right above B tier. It's always kind of sat in that place, that happy A tier, just because freezing people super annoying. Early game, it's incredibly strong, and it's incredibly painful and annoying to lane against because it evolves at level 4 from Vulpix, meaning that very, very early on in the game for those early team fights, it brings a lot of pressure, and it doesn't lose a ton of steam in the late game either. Like its ultimate's good for dealing damage to frozen enemies. Aurora Veil is just an incredible move for keeping yourself alive and dishing out a bunch of damage. And its Dazzling Gleam can stun. All of its moves, it's one of those Pokemon too where every single one of its moves are good. Not every Pokemon can say that. Greninja. Not every Pokemon can say that, right? So having all of its moves be super good means it's going to be a valuable pick. And again, if you like a bulky, it feels more bulky because of Aurora Veil. Attacker that does good in early game and late game, Alolan Ninetales is a great ranged option. Gardevoir is not as great as an option. So it's going to be in the more of a niche to use because it's a lot more fragile. And it takes way longer to get ready. Just like Garchomp, it evolves super late into the game, but it makes up for that with hard to aim, very powerful moves, and an incredibly game-changing ultimate. So the ultimate of Gardevoir is going to be black, kind of like a black hole effect. It draws everybody into the center, deals damage, and just allows your teammates to obliterate them because they're now all stacked together in one spot. You can just hit them with basically all your moves and just wipe an enemy team very quickly. So Gardevoir has so much utility in her ultimate alone that she's going to be a niche pick. Other than that, though, the way that her moves work are you basically have to select a circle with Future Sight, or you have to do like a 3-circle thing with Psyshock, and you basically deal damage to any enemies that are kind of in those circles. So it could be hard. She's hard to learn. She's fragile, but her damage output is very good, and her ultimate is incredible. So Gardevoir is one of those ones where if you're really good at aiming in these games and you know how to keep the proper distance, it's a menace to fight. But it's, again, otherwise it can just be a wet paper towel and do nothing. So Gardevoir is a tricky one. Again, definitely more of a niche pick, 100%. The next one we're going to talk about is Venusaur. And now Venusaur, just like Machamp, is kind of a, well, I'd say Machamp and Venusaur are both kind of like C pluses, if you will, right? So Venusaur has gotten a lot of buffs, has gotten a lot stronger. Especially Solar Beam has gotten a lot stronger. But Solar Beam's still a little awkward to aim, especially because like you have to aim off your screen a lot of times when you're aiming it. And it's just, it just feels a little less than what it should. Like, I think Venusaur needs just like a super tiny additional buff to make it like more of a niche pick like Charizard, because it always just ends up feeling just a little worse in damage than Gardevoir. It's better kind of securing, and it's good at kind of holding an area down because it does have a ton of range on its attacks. And Sludge Bomb, you know, people don't want to deal with a poison circle. So like, it's good, but it just feels like it could be so much better. And it's always just Venusaur is always one of those ones that's kind of been when the game came out, it was really bad. Charizard, Venusaur, Garchomp, they were all super bad, but now it's buffs to put it into an okay place. Like a good Venusaur player can do very well with Solar Beam, but it's still an awkward Pokemon to use, and it feels like it just needs a little bit more, just a little bit more to be kind of more in this niche place with Gardevoir, right? Because again, Gardevoir is probably the direct comparison here. Gardevoir or Pikachu, right? Pikachu's also just, it just does a little more damage. It feels a little bit better than Venusaur, right? So Pikachu's all about, again, range damage, plays out super similarly to Gardevoir, Alolan Ninetales, Venusaur, except its moves just feel good, right? Electro Ball can hit things no matter where they go. Great move. Thunder and Thunder Shock can stun your enemies. And Volt Tackle is actually pretty good for countering Pokemon like Gengar because it jumps in, makes you invincible for a while. And it has a really good way of playing kind of around iframes. So Pikachu is one of those Pokemon where sometimes it's not super surprising to see a Pikachu in high-level ranked games. A lot of people will still play it because it can play very well, and a good Pikachu can do a lot. Plus, its ultimate is very good, but it's very fragile. So, like a Pikachu's ultimate puts down a bunch of Thunderbolts everywhere and just does a ton of damage. But you got to be really careful because Pikachu is very fragile. So during that, I've definitely been killed using my ultimate, right? Because I try and use it in a team fight, get a couple Thunderbolts off, and then die. So you got to be careful to make sure you keep that ideal range, because you get like this weird circle around you, and then everything can kind of get struck by Thunderbolts inside that. But you got to be careful because that circle is not super big, and you're kind of fragile. But again, Pikachu, worse than Alolan Ninetales, I think pretty much everybody would agree. It's not as bulky. It doesn't do as much early game, but still a good pick. It's like an easier to play Gardevoir with a little less damage and a little less frailty. So again, if you like Pikachu, you'll probably like Gardevoir because they are fairly similar. Getting into the one of the physical ranged attackers, Cinderace. So just by being physical, it's a little better because Muscle Band's better, right? And physical attackers in this game are actually just a little better than special attackers in this game because all of your basic attacks will use physical attack, except your boosted basic attack, even if you're a special attacker. So again, physical attackers are just going to be, by the way this game is designed, a little better than special attackers. It's just a choice the devs made. Don't know why they made it that way, but because of that, Cinderace is going to be good. Cinderace used to be here, without a doubt. And then they kind of nerfed it a bit, and then it dropped down to here. So Cinderace is an incredible Pokemon to play jungle, to play middle, and then kind of just get a ton of damage potential off, and it could really carry games to the end. Basically, the way that it works is it gets hits off, and then it raises its own basic attack speed, raises its own basic attacks, and it's just firing off soccer balls of doom, killing off everything, right? So Cinderace, crazy good Pokemon, crazy good damage potential, ranged attacker. However, and I'm actually skipped to Greninja here, it has kind of been usurped by Greninja as the king. So Greninja, even though it has one move in its kit that's completely useless, Double Team, never use it. Smokescreen and Surf are just very strong in the hands of a strong player. So Greninja should almost always be played as jungle. You can kind of play it as a laner, but it should almost always be played by jungle, and it can hard carry a team just because it has such incredible kill potential. So the way you run Greninjas is you run Surf, and the way that Surf works is when you get a kill, Surf resets. So you go in, you hit an enemy with a Surf. Sometimes you hit an enemy in like a bee, you kill the bee, then you get Surf again, you kill another bee, hit the enemy again, and then you just basically keep chaining together these Surfs to just wipe out an entire team. But there have been many times in team fights where I'll wipe out an entire team of 5 as Greninja just because I keep chaining these Surfs together. And again, Greninja is just such a powerful threat because no other Pokemon in the game can get out as much burst damage as Greninja can in a short period of time. He's definitely frail, so he definitely requires some team support to work, but just getting into fights he's just invaluable. You can surf in your basic attacks when you're close, do percentage-based damage instead. Does a different damage calculation when you're in melee range for your basic attacks than when you're in ranged range. When you're far away with your basic attacks, making Greninja a super powerful threat for those type of situations in those fights. So Greninja, it's too valuable. They did nerf Smokescreen a little bit, not enough to hurt Greninja's viability. And once your Smokescreen gets upgraded, you actually do get stronger as well. You get an attack buff, I believe it is. And again, Greninja just does a ridiculous amount. And Greninja is honestly my MVP for when I climbed to Master solo, just because he's such a strong character. And once you learn him, especially your potential to hit and run is so high. You kill something, use a Smokescreen, run away into the grass, they'll never find you. You teleport back to base. It's just the potential of Greninja is so strong. And he has slightly passed Cinderace. But if you feel like you're way better with Cinderace, do something like this, right? But if you're, but just in general, I feel like Greninja is a little stronger in the current meta than Cinderace. And then finally, Cramorant. So Cramorant, I'm going to toss up here in the A tier because Cramorant is super strong. Super strong in the hands of the right player. It can be weird to use. It can be weird to aim. But it's got such a powerful ultimate that can really shut down an entire area. And it just, especially in early game with Whirlpool, like your starting move, Whirlpool is the best early game starting move in the entire game, right? So before it gets its main moves all sorted out, it's the king. Just because Whirlpool does so much add damage. It does so much damage to opponents if they get caught in Whirlpool. So Whirlpool is incredibly strong. And it means that Cramorant is going to be such a huge threat in the early game. Going to be very hard to lane against. And then in the late game, it's got some solid moves that can throw you up. It's got a surf move that can deal a lot of damage and pull you towards or push you away, right? You can also push you away with like Air Slash, for example. But again, Cramorant's just a very solid Pokemon, and its ultimate is game changing. Like if you pop an ultimate in your Dreadnought, nobody can go close to Dreadnought because the amount of damage that your little fish are popping out are insane. Like unless a team has enough people there to just rush in and kill you while you're ultimating, like at the beginning of your ultimate can just get out an insane amount of damage. Like if you're hiding in the grass, Zapdos fight starts, the other team's there, and you pop it while hiding in the grass, they have to run away from whatever they're doing so they don't get killed by Cramorant, because your fish will just bounce between all of the enemies and just start killing all of them. So Cramorant's a very strong pick. Alrighty. So last but not least, let's talk about the Speedsters. Speedsters are in a kind of at least at the top level play, they're just not very good, right? So let's start with Absol and Gengar. So this is probably going to surprise a bunch of people because when the game first released, Gengar was a menace. He was so incredibly good. He was basically invincible for half the time he was attacking. He'd basically use a Sludge Bomb, and you just keep pushing Hex, and then the entire enemy team would be dead. So part of the issue there was because it was so hard to get Gengar out of that combo. Like once he got the Hex combo started, he had so many iframes or invincibility frames where you could just not hit him or not do any damage to him. And he would just run away with the games. Now they nerfed that, and at least in top levels, he's still, both of these Pokemon, Absol and Gengar, they both do just fine in low level ranked and casual play. Specifically for high level play, Masters level play, both of them are quite bad. So again, I want to make this clear. These are two Pokemon that, again, for low level play, casual play, they do so much better than they do in like high level Masters. But in high level Masters, like all the Speedsters, they kind of want to be able to go jungle. They want to level up really fast and be able to carry the team. But in Masters level play, you'd much rather having Greninja or Cinderace or Charizard or even Machamp playing the middle section instead to carry the team, because they're just too frail for a lot of these final fights, and especially now that they're easier to CC and stop, it doesn't really matter, right? So Gengar got a big old nerf, and again, just doesn't play very well in high-level Masters. Absol didn't really get a high-level nerf, but At high level play, it just doesn't work as well. It's incredibly frail. It does a ton of burst damage, but it's so frail. And in top level play, someone's going to put it to sleep. Someone's going to stun it with a Glazzling Gleam. It's going to break its combo. It's going to mess up its combo, and then it's going to die, right? So it'll be strong early game, even in those Masters, as long as you can pick things off, but it doesn't have a lot of ways to escape. And it doesn't have a lot of ways to kind of continue its combos if it gets CC'd, right? So if somebody stuns it or something. Not only that, but Pursuit, one of its moves makes it so that if your Pokemon, if you hit a Pokemon in the back, you deal more damage, but it halves the damage if you don't. So, you know, Masters level players can typically play around that and make sure that Absol's only getting half damage out of Pursuit. So because of that, both of them kind of fall into the bad tier, at least, again, for high level play, right? For high level Masters play. A low level play, totally different ballpark. Zeraora, I'm going to throw him in the B tier. But I'm going to say he's more like a B+. He's out of all the speedsters, he's probably the one that can be played a little bit better in Masters level play. He can combo fairly well with like Blastoise, for example. But he's still a speedster, so he's still a little frail. He's not as frail as the others. And he can play a lane. Same with Gengar. Like nowadays, if you would play a Gengar in Masters, you probably would also, you would lane that Gengar. You wouldn't actually play the middle. But he just feels a little weak because he's a speedster, right? He just feels like, you know, like, why am I not taking something like Cinderace, right? Why am I not taking something that can deal a little bit more damage with a little bit more bulk, right? So he's in a weird place, but he's definitely a good pick. He can jump in really fast, discharge. He can do a bunch of damage to a bunch of things at once. But again, overall, still a little frail. And once you use up your sparks, you really can't get out. So he's in a weird spot, but he's still good. He's still niche, and you still do see him in Masters from time to time. And then finally, the most surprising one. Again, this used to be here without a doubt, but Talonflame's actually making it kind of a comeback, and I'm actually kind of excited to see it. So Talonflame got a ton of buffs that make its fly move especially better. So basically, Talonflame is now the king of jumping in, killing something, and running away really fast. That's how you play Talonflame. You jump in, you get some damage out, you kill something, and then you run away as quickly as you can. So Talonflame is really the best example of just a pure ganker, a pure killer, a Pokemon that just goes in, kills something really quick, hit and run tactics. But unlike Absol, it has a better escape. Unlike Gengar, it seems like Talonflame could actually get out of there, and it plays really well in the hands of a very good player, because you go in, you fly, you Brave Bird, you fly, you Flame Charge, you just get out. Right? You do these moves super quickly, super rapid succession, and then you get out of there. And again, it does enough damage right up front with its burst. Like, unlike Absol, you kind of have to build up a little bit of combo with its burst. With Talonflame, its burst damage is all front loaded, and then you leave, right? So it allows it to be a better revenge killer, a better Pokemon to pick opposing Pokemon as they try and run away. So, but yeah, that's it, guys. So that's going to be the tier list. And I know some of you guys are going to disagree. And again, this will definitely change as the meta continues to change and it continues to evolve. But as the current place, right when the mobile version releases, unless we get a balance patch with the mobile version, this is where I think the current status is for, again, the high-level Masters level play. I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion. So again, I did discuss this with a few other Master players, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What Pokemon do you think that I should put higher or lower? Or maybe do you think I overrated or underrated something? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if you guys want to see more tier lists as the game continues to evolve. And also, to all you mobile players out there, welcome to Pokemon Unite. We're happy to have you, and I'm excited to play against you. So, but anyway, guys, that'll be it for this video. Hopefully this was helpful to give you guys at least a starting point for who you might want to play as when jumping into Pokemon Unite for the first time. And good luck, guys. It's a fun ride.